Hello, everyone, and welcome to XCMeducate's Expert Speaker Series, Tech-Enabled Services, Remote Staffing. My name is Amy Silvestri, and I will be your host today during this session. Shelley Boyer, Director of Client Accounting Services, and David Harris, Director of Tax Services, will review the pros and cons of outsourcing and will discuss how your firm can leverage your current skills and expertise along with outside resources available to you. The webinar will then open for Q&A. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about this webinar. XCM Solutions is registered with NASBA as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE sponsors. As such, we are excited to offer 1 CPE credit for today's webinar. A total of 4 polls will be conducted throughout the presentation, and you will need to participate in 3 polls in order to receive CPE credit. Your CPE certificate will be sent to your email you use to register for the webinar within 72 hours after the session. If you do not receive your certificate, please email us at xcmclientservices@xcmsolutions.com. Please note, CPE is not available when viewing the on-demand version of this webinar. If you experience difficulty answering the polling questions, please type your answers in the question pane of the control panel, and we will ensure you receive credit for those questions. You will also have the opportunity to submit text questions by typing your question into the questions pane of the control panel. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session. If we do not get to your questions during today's webinar, we will be sure to follow up afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Shelley and Dave.
All right, thank you, Amy. Appreciate it. Welcome everyone for attending today on the Tech-Enabled Services Remote Staffing. Wanted to just run through an agenda of what we're going to highlight through today. Both Shelley and I working together throughout this presentation. Remote staffing, why would we look at remote staffing? And often that maybe some common concerns that come into play when you think about a remote staffing. So we'll touch on those areas and what we see and what we hear in the industry, as well as how strategy derives success. With the remote staffing, we'll show you a little bit of how it works from both a client accounting services side and a tax side. And then we'll talk a little bit about pricing. We won't go too in detail, but we'll talk about what it looks like from a package or an individual service pricing standpoint on the tax side. So if we look ahead to what we call the new norm today, I think we're all adjusting to what the new norm is. It's identified, I can say, but will it be here to stay? Will it not be here to stay? What are we looking at? What does this future look like? How is the role of a CPA changing? What are the relationships? I think this past year with you know, what has played out in how you're servicing your clients and how you serviced your clients in March and early April was probably much different than how you serviced your clients in 2019 during that same time frame with the push of the tax deadline, etc. So as you probably feel now that your clients need you more now today with the changing landscape of the tax laws that come into play with what has gone on in the industry as well. To do that. You know, social distancing, okay, that's a new term, right? We're all working from home. We're conducting the webinar from home. So, of course, you know, a little bit of, you know, housekeeping things. If you hear a dog bark, we apologize, but, you know, that's the new norm, right? I think that's where we're headed. So, with that, we'll get into the tech-enabled remote staffing, and Shelley will go through that information as we go forward.
Great, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Amy. So I'd like to talk to you about what exactly tech-enabled remote staffing means and how it plays into our service offerings. So first off, XCM tech-enabled services. So it means the use of existing technology to deliver better, faster, cheaper outcomes than traditional alternatives. We love the comparison to Uber in this relation because of what they've done with something that's kind of always been around, or at least as long as the automobile has been around, taxi services, right? And what Uber did is they took technology that already was out there in the marketplace and applied it in a way that revolutionized the industry of ride sharing and what we know it to be today. So that's the best example, an analogy to use it when we're trying to explain what tech-enabled services are. And we'll definitely get into more of what it means when it comes to client accounting services and tax. But basically, it's the combination of technology, process, people, and cloud. And of course, it's not going to be successful unless you have a great strategy of execution and a plan for how to tackle it efficiently. So we'll get into this in more detail in today's webinar. So what is remote staffing from XCMeducate? So it's not outsourcing in your traditional sense, because we offer dedicated teams. So you're not necessarily sending it to a pool. You're sending it to staff members that are an extension of your team. And the best part is that XCMeducate takes care of the hiring, recruiting, training, and managing, which we know, and we'll get into today as well, is a huge pain point in the accounting industry today. So we take that burden off of you for at least your remote staff team members. And scaling up or down is very streamlined and simple to do with us as well. We've got a bench of trained professionals ready to go with as little as a 30-day window of turnaround. So that's really convenient for our customers as well. We're actually going to hop into our first polling question, and I'll hand it over to Amy to run with that.
Great, thanks guys. Okay, so the first polling question we're going to launch is, what experience have you had with offshore remote staffing of tax and or accounting services? Are you currently leveraging remote staffing for tax? Did you try in the past, currently not using remote staff? Never tried but interested in learning more? Or I don't have a need for remote staff today? And we'll give everyone just a few minutes to submit your answers. Okay, we'll just give a couple more seconds.
Yeah, a good amount coming through.
All right, we're going to close the poll and we'll share out. So Shelley, it looks like about 50% say they've tried in the past. We've got 25 that currently and 25 that never have used it.
Great. So a nice mix out there. It's nice to have an audience that has tried it as well as interested in trying it, or maybe has some experiences and is aware of what the process looks like, but maybe they're just not using it today. And of course, it's great to see there's not anyone who necessarily doesn't have a need for it today. So we've got the right people in the room. So that's great. And we're excited to dig in a little bit further. So moving on here, let's see, I just want to make sure you can see my slide. All right. And so how are remote staff tech-enabled? So connecting the pieces, we talked about what tech-enabled services are. How are our remote staff tech-enabled? So what we do is we utilize cloud applications, like I was saying earlier, the cloud and technology to their highest functionality. So yes, we're absolutely using staffing and people, and we want to make the maximum use of technology. And so this could mean using the QuickBooks Online bank feeds to their highest extent. It could be utilizing Adobe tools to the best functionality that's available to us, and just being smart with the resources and tools that are at our fingertips, including the XCM platform. So that comes into play as a very important piece of our tech-enabled remote staffing as well, which we'll talk about today. So artificial intelligence is great, and it's definitely buzzing and gaining more and more traction, especially in the accounting industry. And what we've learned is that it definitely has to be taught. So it can get really smart, but you have to spend the upfront time teaching it. So it's sometimes an all-in decision when you're picking an AI tool because of all the upfront effort that you're putting into it, and also the fact that once you get everyone up and running, it's just difficult to break away from. So There's also a lot of AI tools that automate accounts payable, very streamlined, and they do a great job at it. So the question becomes what to do about the transaction-heavy and time-consuming bank and credit card coding. So we find that it's key to become the expert in what the software or perhaps some add-ons to the software have to offer, and how can we maximize our time spent on these transactions weekly or daily, however often you're in there. And obviously we know some of the tools are the bank rules and how you can automate those and have those post directly to the GL automatically, as just one example of the many different features that you can enable your staff with to get the job done using technology. And of course, staying up to date on these new releases and functions is a must, because they're just rapidly advancing. So you don't want to get stuck in what happened, the latest technology last year. You want to definitely stay up to date. Okay, what's the latest updates? What is this pop-up trying to tell me? And at least earmarking it and giving yourself a note to go back and explore what, let's say, maybe a pop-up or a new email telling you something that's going on is really trying to tell you. That's the best way to stay up to date on that type of stuff. And of course, attend webinars such as this one and other industry webinars that are even led by, let's say, Intuit or Intact or Bill.com. So our goal as a service provider is to handle the most transaction heavy work, both on the tax and the CAS side, while you and your staff focus on working at the top of your license, being consultation services, the higher level reviews that you need to do, and really delivering on those higher value services to your customer. So here is a diagram where you can see XCM right in the middle, powering everything that has to do with outsourcing. So I know some of you are already leveraging outsourcing to some extent. And we know you're already an XCM workflow customer. So some of you might already understand how this process works, but for those who might not be too familiar yet, just think about the way that you're using XCM internally today, and where you're thinking about the step where you would move it to your internal staff to work on something, and just flip that out with our Tax staff member. It's really that easy, and we work with you during implementation to make sure that your tasks setup and configuration is nice and strong, so that whomever is doing the work has full direction and visibility to what they need to do, but it's all hosted within the XCM platform. And we've highlighted a few functionality here, pieces of functionality that are very important to our outsourcing in XCM. So just assigning tasks to individuals from a single hub, I think it's something we tend to take for granted. It's at the root of everything that XCM is built around, and just the fact that you can assign tasks easily to somebody without getting up from your desk, from a cloud-based system that's accessible from any device. So we don't want to lose sight of how powerful that feature is. And then using checklists, we'll talk about checklists briefly towards the end of this webinar, but definitely very powerful tool to use when it comes to outsourcing effectively. Client-specific points in XCM, hopefully that's something you're taking advantage of today, even within your own firm internally, because points is a great way to centralize data within your firm or your department. And you can also easily link tasks between departments and connect the dots between tax and CAS and figure out where are the handoffs and what is important for one team to know about the other team's work, and connect those dots within the one centralized platform. So now we're going to move on to why look to remote staffing, and this brings us to our second polling question. So I will hand that off to Amy.
Great, thanks, Shelley. So the next question, what would you say is the number one challenge managing your firm today? Is it attracting new clients, cybersecurity and data privacy, identifying opportunities for practice improvement and cost, raising profitability, recruiting and retaining talent? And we'll give everybody a few minutes to submit their answers.
Great, it looks like we've got some more answers coming in. We've got a tie right now, 50-50. Let's see if we can break the tie.
Yeah, it looks like we're trending towards the two answers that I thought would be most answered, and seeing that others are not there,
Yeah.
which is great.
So we'll close it shortly and we'll look at our results. All right. Thank you, Amy.
Welcome.
So yeah, it looks like we have between those two answers. And sorry, Amy, if I cut you off, I might have lost audio briefly. So I think I'm back though. So apologies if I did cut you off in any way. But so we've got our two primary answers: identifying opportunities for practice improvement and cost, and recruiting and retaining talent. So no surprises there. Like Dave mentioned, this is a common polling question that we've issued many times. And because we do that, we like to track the answers that we get. And as you'll see, the combined results from our previous webinars that we've done, those are the top two responses, and with the number one actually cumulatively being the recruiting and retaining talent. So you're right in line with what a lot of the challenges have been up until now, and it kind of proves out that these are still challenges facing the industry today. So thank you for completing that poll. Looking deeper at what some other challenges of remote work are, or challenges today, one of the biggest being remote work. We've kind of been catapulted into it, whether we wanted to be or not. Lots of accounting firms out there already had the ability to work remotely, but there's also a lot who did not yet. And so this is definitely a big challenge, whether you've been doing it part-time or not. And we find that this comic is just all too real, and in terms of what it's communicating there. So I think we could get a chuckle out of that. But it's very real, the challenges around it. You know, the work from home technology is nothing like we have at the office in most situations, with our high, the best Wi-Fi, the best in class printers and scanners, and even office supplies, and just a quiet space to take a phone call. A lot of the things that we took for granted once are things that are right at the forefront today. So how do we ensure staff productivity and ensure that source documentation, things like source documentation, still runs off effectively? And again, it's really forcing us all into the cloud, or at least into taking a hard look at the technology that we're using internally. And how can we fight against those distractions? I mean, it's impossible to eliminate them. So how can we keep ourselves and our team motivated and keeping up with the changing priorities of the day? So that's definitely the most current challenge that we're all facing. And we believe that a mix of cloud technology, a centralized platform, and getting help with your most time-consuming transactional work will help alleviate a lot of the challenges that remote work is causing today. So here is a poll right here: wish you had more time. And so this was something that was released to the industry. You can see every year. So you've got 2017, 2018, 2019 results here. And you can see vacationing and relaxing is the number one area people wish that they had more time for. And the funny part is, what's not in this survey, as I'm sure comes at no surprise to anybody, is compliance work. No one's sitting there wishing they had more time to do this type of transaction-heavy compliance work. So again, no surprises there, but that's just where we come in to help, again, just with the compliance work there that we'll get into later. We'll outline exactly what it is that we do for the firms that we work with. And one of the goals of this webinar is to just explain how we're here to help minimize the compression that takes place in your firm. So it's no secret when the tax season compression is, but when it comes to CAS, it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily as annually based as the tax season compression, but we experience in client accounting services compression within every month, and you're going to have the monthly compression in client accounting services. And when everyone's bank statements come in, there's a mad rush to get everyone closed and out the door and get the consulting work done. So there's definitely compression in both areas. And I'm going to wrap up here, and I'll pass it along to Dave for any additional comments he has about the graphs on the screen right now, and then he's going to take us into some common concerns.
Sure. So with this graph, compression, we all see it during tax season, and it's laid out for each month of where we see compression and where every firm sees compression. I was in the industry in public CPA space for 15 years at a large national CPA firm, and these are the compression times, right, that you see here. So we identify that, and we send out progress reports to our firms that are using this on the tax side. And then we provide a progress report on how do you measure up against your peers, same firm, same size, same employee size. Where are they with their outsourcing commitment level? What percentage to complete are they at? And if you're ahead, what are you doing differently that other firms aren't, and vice versa? If you're behind, same thing as well. So we use this as a tracking tool. This is provided to everyone who uses offshore services for the tax side. And I'm sure Shelley has something similar on the CAS side as well. But again, that's month to month. So you certainly see that continuously throughout the year. Where here you see this during tax season, and it's the first tax season in April as we go through. I know there's a second tax season out there, September 15th, which we're heading into shortly. Got another 7 days to reach that benchmark, and then we also have October 15th. Where those are still busy times, but it's where it might be more manageable from some points. For some, maybe not for all. So that's what we do. We send out progress reports just to show where you're coming in based on where we would anticipate you to come into. So now we can talk about the common concerns, which I see it's going to bring us to a polling question, and we're going through these polling questions fairly quickly, but it's not the last one. So I will turn it over to Amy. She'll go through the polling question, bring up the polling, and then we can talk about those results. Amy?
Thanks, Dave. I'm going to launch the third one. What is your biggest concern about utilizing remote staffing services? Employee and staff perception, client perception, security of client data, quality of work, or loss of control? We'll give just a few more seconds to let everybody get their responses in.
Yeah, there's a trend here.
Yep.
With the polling question versus the last polling question that we just had.
We're still getting some in, so we'll give just a couple more seconds.
And we were tied. Now we broke the tie.
Yep. Exactly the answers I would have seen. All right, we seem to have stopped, so I'm going to close it and share out the results for you. So it looks like 43% say security of client data and about 57% say quality of work.
Okay, great. So again, these are the two that we hear and see quite frequently when we have polling questions out there on this specific topic. As you saw, quality of work was head of security of client data. That has been dwindling in terms of, individuals being focused on client data security. I mean, it is high on someone's priority list, but it's not the number one reason why they wouldn't use remote staffing. Where it might have been when, back in 2002, when we started to go through this, but technology has changed throughout the day. And quality of work, we hear that as well. So the security, just to give you an idea of where we are with that, we go through an annual SOC 2 certification year over year. They're based on the Costco framework, which is showed in the diagram in the bottom, in the right-hand side below. There's a confirmation of an unqualified audit opinion and final reports that we have issued And we're also conducting it in accordance with the AICPA standards. So this is year over year that we do to indicate that, you know, security is a high priority on our list as well. And it's becoming almost required for any technology company out there today. So that provides some comfort level when we talk about security as well, to go through that. Going on to the voice of the customers, what we hear, you know, one of the items we saw in the polling questions was quality of work, right? So we might see here that, you know, doing a great job, really appreciate it. You give us the help you need us to, work is getting done on time and getting done well. You know, if you take a look at some of these you say, oh, well, this is great. This is what I would have anticipated, and then some. Where when you get information back and review it, whether it be on the client accounting services side or the tax side of it, you may pick up on things that said, that is great. Your team picked up on items that maybe someone in our organization would not have picked up on, or you picked up on something that we think you would not have, but you did, which is excellent. So we hear that from time to time from our customers about how we're doing and how that looks. Now, if we look at the second part of that is, again, survey of customers, piggybacking off of that previous polling question. You know, where do we find that remote staffing works great? Number one is greater capacity, without having to go through hiring seasonal employees year over year. Certainly, you're going to hire some, maybe some interns, because you need some individuals to enter into the practice, grow the practice over time, and eventually, excuse me, take over. So we realize that, but greater capacity as well is an additional team considered as your team members as well. Opportunity for growth and training, having your staff members, the 1 to 2 year staff members start to grow and train from our information that we do. Any task that is used from our remote staffing that the 1 to 2 year staff on your side can review, start to act like managers, act like senior managers, etc. Focus on the value-added services for your clients, not just the data input. I'll skip over work-life balance. We know that's out there today, and it seems to be working. A lot more firms are putting that into play, and that's working well. But the number one item where we hear this remote staffing works the best is better client service. They're able to get back to their clients in a timely manner of either missing information or to move on to the next task that they may have. We know that just for a taxpayer or a client accounting services client, it's not just doing the books, or it's not just preparing the individual tax return. So you're able to move through the workflow a lot quicker. If we talk about the strategies, what drives success, and those are things that Shelley can touch upon and walk through. And so she'll go through the next few slides after turning it over to me, and we'll start to go through what that looks like.
Great. All right, yes, let's dig on in. So strategy is really important when you're signing up for outsourcing services, whether it be tax or client accounting services. There's definitely some things that we know are required to make sure that it's an effective move and transition and ongoing relationship. So number one on here is clear objectives and staff buy-in, which it was good to see that everyone on the call does not necessarily have their staff perception high on the concerns list. You know, of course, you could only pick one. You weren't rating them most important to least important. So maybe it isn't a concern of yours. So And rightfully so. And it's important to set clear objectives with your staff, gain their buy-in, make sure they understand what the benefit for them is, which a big one is that Dave just had in his slide a second ago, is the work-life balance they're going to gain from it. And then also just the fact that they're going to be able to work at the top of their license. We've mentioned it before, but that's one of the primary benefits for the staff, is that they're going to progress in their career more quickly than maybe they otherwise would have if they were stuck being bogged down with all the transaction heavy work and not really being able to gain that client facing experience, which is so important. You really can't teach something like that. So to gain that actual hands-on client consulting experience at that stage in your career, really any stage, is very important to their own professional growth. And so that conversation is important. And then equally important is having a clear path for what your strategy around an outsource coordinator is going to be. So depending on the size of whichever department, tax or client accounting services that you're signing up for, it could mean that you have one dedicated outsourcing coordinator. You could have multiple, and there's different structures around an outsource coordinator that we could walk you through and decide what is the best path for your firm to make it successful. Client and task selection is another thing. So, what are you going to start off by sending to us? Are you going to just send us all of your bank reconciliations and transactional work because that's a super heavy part of your business? Are you going to tack on accounts payable and accounts receivable at first, or are you going to do that as the second phase when it comes to client accounting services? And then on the tax side, same thing. You probably wouldn't just sign up and send us 100% of your tax return. So what is your strategy going to be? Are you going to send us your most difficult to start to get it off your plate? Or do you want to start off with some of the easier ones to gain confidence in the services we're providing? So there is definitely a strategy conversation to be had around the client and task selection. Define tech stack. So what exactly of the technology that you use are you going to be using outsourcing for? So maybe you support many different cloud-based systems, but you're going to start outsourcing all of your QBO work, QuickBooks Online work. That doesn't have to be what you decide to do, but that's just an example of one strategy you might have. XCM workflow, huge piece of what we do. All of you currently use XCM workflow, but maybe you're not using it in the department you wish to start outsourcing. Maybe you're using it for tax, but not CAS yet. So that's something that we take care of as part of the implementation process. And we consult with you and we build out that part of your site. Or if your site's already built, we'll take a look at it and we'll rebuild it or tweak and tool and make sure it's where it needs to be for you. XCMeducate is truly a part of your team. We want you to see them that way. So when it comes to if you're planning any additional trainings to be deployed to your entire staff, include XCMeducate. If it's not possible to include us live, record it for us or maybe give us the materials afterwards. So we definitely want to be seen as a part of your team, and we see our client relationships as a true partnership, and we do make sure that everyone's set up with the right strategy to make it successful so that we can have an ongoing year-over-year partnership with your firm and help you grow. So moving on to internal structure driving strategy, this can be an important differentiator for maybe choosing one strategy over another strategy. So we've highlighted 3 key internal structures. This doesn't mean there's nothing outside of these structures, but this is probably what we see most commonly as one of these 3 structures. So all management level, that would be if you've gotten to the point in your firm, or if you'd like to get to the point in your firm, where all of your staff members are what you would consider management level. Not now, and we're not talking about executive level. We mean, at the highest level, they're all able to deliver the consultative work or the highest level review, and you really don't want any of them doing any transactional work. So that is definitely a place that you're able to get to. We certainly have firms that are there today, and outsourcing is a key piece of obviously making that successful, because somebody has to do the transactional work. Someone has to make sure that everything's recorded properly or populating the tax returns. So that's something where your strategy for outsourcing would be outsourcing everything that is not requiring a higher level person. And we have experience with making that work. Another structure is maybe you have a team structure by accounting platform, service line, or niche. And we might see this with the larger, if we're talking about client accounting services, you might start to have a structure like this when you start to have maybe 15 or more people within your client accounting services department. It might start to make sense to adopt a team structure. So and it really will depend on your menu of services. So if you're delivering just your basic essential accounting services with some consulting, you might not need a lot more than your basic GL. So it might make sense if you're supporting QuickBooks Online and Intact to have a QuickBooks Online team and an Intact team. Or if you're offering your essential accounting services plus business process outsourcing, so you'll process the AP, you'll input the AR, maybe you'll do some collections work, you might have a different team for AP and AR, or your business process outsourcing team versus your monthly closing team. And then similarly for niches, if you decided to have more than one niche, you could have different teams for each niche. So what we find here is that each team, because they're doing such different types of work, or they're using different systems to do that work, would carve out a piece that's suitable for remote staffing. And that could look very different depending on what the teams look like. The third group is the collaborative group, and we find this is probably, I don't want to say the more common, but we see this a lot. And this is almost like your jack of all trades kind of client accounting services department. So it's where, regardless of what your tech stack is or what your menu of services is, just about every member of your team is able to fulfill that entire menu of services. So if you're doing AP, payroll, and monthly close, one person could see that client through their entire month, every month or quarter, and so on. And so the best approach there is for us to meet with the key stakeholders of that team. So maybe it's the whole team. And everyone, as you can see, puts their heads together and says, okay, what makes sense to outsource? We're all kind of doing everything. First of all, let's streamline how we're doing everything. That can be the most difficult, that we help you through, where everyone might be doing a payroll differently. Everyone might be going about using Bill.com differently. So everyone gets their heads together and first of all, definitely gets on the same page of how things should be done, which is how we build out XCM. And then the outsourcing comes as a result of that effort. And you, along the way, figure out what makes sense to outsource. So that being said, that's a lot of food for thought. And we definitely want to know what best describes your firm's internal structure. So this is leading us to our fourth and final polling question. So I'll hand it to Amy.
Thanks, Shelley. And yes, this is the last one. So as a reminder, if you need CPE, you need to answer 3 of the 4. So this is the last one you can answer if you haven't answered 3 yet. Which best describes your firm's internal structure for client accounting services department? All management levels, teams by accounting platform niche service line, collaborative approach, combination of the above, or none of the above? Still seeing some come in, so we'll give just a couple more seconds.
All right, yeah, we're seeing one clear leader, but we've got some others as well.
The third one snuck in there.
Yep.
All right, we've seemed to slow, so I'm going to close the poll and share out. So Shelley, it looks like 50% are collaborative approach, with 33% being a combination of the above and 17 being teams by accounting platform niche and service line.
All right, great. So it looks like collaborative approach was the runaway there, and no surprises there. And I would just say, if you haven't utilized our XCM consultants already, that's an area that we can definitely, whether you're outsourcing or not, we can definitely help you out there if you'd like it, in terms of getting everything on one streamlined process for each type of task. And then similarly with the teams by accounting platform niche or service line, there's some really cool ideas we can put into place with checklists. So if you've got, let's say you're migrating clients to different platforms, or you're implementing Bill.com, there's definitely some ways that you can use XCM that you might not have realized before, because you've got that knowledge internally. So you really want to take advantage of being able to get it all into one place and not lose it wherever that might be stored, or maybe it's not documented at all. So definitely would just encourage you to think about maybe using XCM to track some of those different functions within those teams. So that's great. Thanks again for your participation there. And I will hand it off, I believe, to Dave, because he's going to go over some of the advanced planning that you definitely want to consider, especially on the tax side. So Dave, take it away.
Yeah, and that piggybacks, off the previous polling question of, collaborative approach, right? We saw 50% come in. When we look at it, remote staffing, you also need a collaborative approach of, we're gonna do this. We're going to use remote staffing, and what do we need to do to get there, and who's on board, and what does that look like? So advanced planning is certainly key. Now shifting it to the tax side, everyone may have heard of 7216, which is under the Treasury Reg 301.7216. And what you need to have remote staffing from a tax standpoint. This came out in 2008, I believe, where before 2008, there was not such a regulation out there. 2008 came out, not too many people use remote staffing, and now we're seeing that firms are using remote staffing, and this doesn't come into play anymore. Where I say it doesn't come into play, you still are required to have it. It's just not a setback to make a decision if you're going to move forward from a remote staffing standpoint. It is specific to the 1040 series of tax returns outlined there. Disclosure from an entity standpoint, there's no standard form laid out by the IRS like there is for the individual, the 1040 series. But we do see, and we have heard, that what is in your engagement letter has some notification to your clients that you may use third-party vendors, and if the wording is there that they're going to be a remote staffing, whatever terminology that is, that would be, the notification to your client that you're using remote services. This is something where we provide information on. We don't consult in this area. It's really good to check in with your legal team to see what you need and what you don't need from an entity standpoint. If we look to the challenges around the consent form and what that looks like, and talk about planning and what challenges may come up, participation, who's going to participate? Firms come on board, and there might be two partners that say, we're going to do this, where those are the individuals that came to us and said, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to roll it out. And when we roll it out, there's 20 partners in the tax department in total, and so they start to roll it out to all 20. Really need to identify, are all 20 going to participate, or are they not going to participate? Some may not want to, based on how am I going to communicate this to my client, which, jumping ahead to the third one on the right, what does that look like? We need to distribute the consent form. And Charlie, you can go back to the previous slide for one moment. In the engagement letter, how do we put that? Do we send it off with an engagement letter? Do we put a cover letter with a consent form? When do we distribute? Timing. Planning, timing is everything in planning. If you don't plan ahead and you don't time it right accordingly, you may not be successful. From a tax side, client accounting services, same thing. It takes a while to plan and get up to par with the CAS team in where you need to be and what the expectations are. I can tell you that firms come to us in December and January and say, okay, I want to roll out outsourcing. remote staffing. And how do we do it? Well, we talked about the consent form and what that looks like, and we need to distribute to your clients. And maybe your engagement letters already went out. Well, now you missed that opportunity. So a lot of firms come to us in August, September, October, November that are successful because they have time to plan as we go through. So communication, I was talking about that, so we can go through the communication part on the next slide. Cover letter. Sometimes they're recommended, sometimes they're not. I highlighted some of the wording that goes over well, and that has had a lot of success with having your clients respond to having the consent form on file. You know, it comes through with what your goal is, what your strategy is, and where you're moving forward, and really why you're doing it. You know, evaluating opportunities to streamline the prep. Okay, you're using you're limiting the electronically organizing of your source data. Okay, that means you limiting it to electronic. We do everything electronically. Okay, documents getting put into the right software, right? You know, helping do the data entry. Okay, and of course we get down to value-added services enables you to focus more on complex areas of the return for that client. So these do go over well. Some may say it's calling attention to the consent form. Some may not, but we have seen a lot of success using cover letters with this information in it. So now if we move forward to the remote staffing and the process and how we staff your remote staffing, experienced staff. Okay, rigorous training curriculum that we have a dedicated individual over there that designs, along with my help, what type of training needs to be done, where do we need to focus. We hire skilled accounting professionals. We have a dedicated team approach, equivalent to 1 to 3 years experience from a preparation standpoint. Supervisors and managers have 7 to 10 years plus experience, and that have been with us for quite some time. We redefined processes since 2002. So we started this practice in 2002, which then evolutioned the XCM workflow product that we have as well. That is very successful. Best practice playbook. So we go through what are your best practices when you use remote staffing. And then the tech-enabled platform, which is XCM workflow that I just mentioned, that you have there at your fingertips. Looking at that team structure, again, dedicated team approach. On the right-hand side, we have manager, supervisor, and preparer. So this is your standard setup. It may be 3 preparers, it may be 5, it may be 10, right? Depending on the size of how many returns you're going to outsource or leverage for your remote staffing at that time. Again, general manager, training coordinators, they are with these teams constantly to make sure that they're up to par and speed with all the changes in the tax laws that we have. If we look at how Expert Tax outsourcing works, same on the client accounting services as well. You have new clients, they send you source documents that goes to your firm. You're going to provide it to us in the XCM workflow. You're going to have our remote members go ahead and log in and prepare the information that is provided, and then the completed work is going to go back to the firm for review. So this is where workflow comes into play as well. You're going to see it move through those various steps as you go through the process. And on the tax prep side, again, same information that I mentioned in the previous slide. Source documents, when you upload it, it goes to a central file, a central server, which is located in the US. And then we prepare the information in the tax return that you have, and then within 24 to 48 hours, the return is complete. Now, that return is complete based on the information that you provide us, okay? And here's the turnaround times that we've had for the last I'd say 2 or 3 years, even beyond that, where our turnaround time 24 hours is at 95%. 24 to 48 hours. Now, if it's above 72 hours, those are certainly large turnaround times, okay? Those are probably large tax returns as well. CAS turnaround varies based on complexity and depth of project, so same on the tax side, on the turnaround time. But we also see that it's providing source documents that maybe you only have 25% or 50% of the information, which is where a lot of our clients like to start. Rather than have information sit on the floor, as we call it, or in the drawer, send it to the remote staffing, and we can get that through, inspect the preparation so you know what's missing. And you have that within a very quick turnaround time. If we look at how that works out for you in terms of comparison from 17 to 18 and where we are, and where we had more that were in process from prior years, 7 to 8% more returns were completed on average using remote staffing as they go through. And we pull this data from what we have, and we can see who's ahead of using remote staffing and who is not ahead with that, who do not use remote staffing at the end of the day. So we're going to take a look here. We have a lot of highlights going on here. Some of you may have seen this before. I like to continuously go through this because as I continue to talk with clients, there's things that they seem to either overlook or find that maybe they did not know, which I just like to go through this and just make sure that everyone is aware of what happened. So with the bookmarks on the left-hand side, which is highlighted there, we go through, we take that source documents and we bookmark it. Then we go through and we annotate with highlights, where we make sure we scan it for the correct tax year and for the correct social security number, as you can see, to make sure that we're using the correct data that goes into that source document. We also have hyperlinks, which is identified by that blue box. Once we click on that blue box, we click on it, and then it goes to the next page and where we found that. And then when we click on that blue box from that page and where we found it, it goes back to the original spot that you're at, to verify where that $600 came from. Once you do that, you sign off on the right-hand side, or our members do, and on the left-hand side. And when you do that, the bookmarks turn the appropriate color of what you just signed off on. So when you've fully signed off on all of the bookmarks, they will be in that certain color that you signed off in on that time. Looking ahead for the work papers that we provide. So we also provide Excel worksheets, which is identified down below. So if we take that same $600 from that source document, you can see it's inputted on the Excel document that is summarizing the interest and dividends. We also have the page numbers identified there, and that page number is a hyperlink that goes back to the PDF, which you can see on the left-hand side, and then it brings you over to the right to verify where that $600 is. Again, you go ahead and sign off on that part. The bookmark changes to your certain color, and then off you go to the next review. Looking through at the control sheet and the detail of the interest, you can see the detail of the interest. The two combined numbers gives you the $31.50. And that control sheet will ultimately tie out to the tax return for the line item. Those line numbers are from the 2017 forms. They're not updated for the new ones, but certainly for the new ones, whatever line number that falls on, that's where it's going to reside, and that's where you'll find it. And that helps out with the overall review of the tax return as you go through. Looking into visibility of it within the XCM platform. So for the workflow, you'll have the visibility of where it is in at. So the status, OSOA and acceptance, or to be outsourced. And then down below, you have outsourced. And then you have the status, is it preparation, is it final review, awaiting bookmarking. That's the first status in our steps that we do when we go through the preparation. what you can see here is that the bottom half is to know that a return has been outsourced. The top half is under an administrative task, or it says admin on the left side for tasks. That's where those are the cues on the firm side to either a return is ready to be outsourced. So if someone internally indicated that this return can be outsourced, so we'll send it to our tax team members internally, outsourced coordinators as we call them, to gather information and then send it to the team. And when they do, that's when you see the information below that you can say, okay, it's in the outsourced bin and the status of where it's at that time. And so again, full visibility on where that goes and how that looks as you move through. Going ahead on there's other standardized procedures that Shelley will talk through based on visibility as well. So she'll go through those on this slide here.
All right, thanks, Dave. Lots of great information to understand how it all works on the tax side. A lot of it's transferable to client accounting services as well, with this task movement and the way that it can be structured. So we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to kind of breeze through some of these slides and make some assumptions that since you're already using XCM workflow, you're familiar with some of these features already. So we'd love to highlight checklists. You can see an example on the screen right now of what a monthly closing checklist looks like once we've built it all out. And one thing worth noting for the outsourcing, especially let's say of client accounting services, although I suppose it's the same for tax, is that we don't necessarily have you create a separate checklist for the outsourcing team. Our view of it is that no matter who's doing the work, the process should really be the same. The steps should be the same. So when you utilize our implementation services to streamline XCM for whichever department you're outsourcing, you gain a lot of value internally as well, because we make it so that everything we're building is also usable for your internal team. And you can also take advantage and have us build out additional task types that you might not be outsourcing. As far as points, it's a very powerful tool for task-specific communication when it pertains to the work being done. So this is for your client-specific nuances that might not be in a specific checklist, because the checklist applies to any monthly close or any accounts payable task. And then the point section allows you to say, for this specific client, this needs to be done every month, or this is a preference that either that the client usually will have. Moving on to the type of client accounting services work that we do. This is a list of the work we do most frequently and we do a really great job at. And I want to point out what you see in parentheses as basic, plus, or custom. So if you've talked to us about outsourcing client accounting services work in the past, you've likely heard about our FTE model, which is currently we still have our FTE model. What we're referring to it here is custom. So our FTE model will include anything on the screen. You're basically signing up for a full-time equivalent, and you get 8 hours per regular business day. And we have full structure around that to help you outsource what is most important to your client accounting services department and keep building on that. But we have a couple of other options. If you just wanted help with your basic essential accounting services, you can now sign up for essential or basic bookkeeping services, so we can keep up with the transactions and reconcile your accounts. And then you could go one step further and say, not only do I want that, but I also want help with my business process outsourcing functions, such as AP, AR, and expense reporting. Now, that being said, there is type of work, CAS work to keep, such as direct client relations, moving money, firm administration. And then moving on, these are the applications that we support most often. It's not to say if there's something you don't see here, we likely do still support it. If it's desktop based, you'd want that FTE model custom package. And if it's cloud based and depending on the services, you would fall under the basic or plus packages. So we've got a few extra options you might not have heard of yet. So digging quickly into pricing information, and we're going to end here today. For the client accounting services that we talked about, the baseline package actually starts at $7.99 a month, which includes your first 1 to 10 cloud-based company files. We are currently running a promotion through October 9th that you can get a discounted implementation fee if you sign up for client accounting services. So definitely contact us if this is something you're thinking of doing this calendar year and you'd like help with CAS. And then there's there's the additional services that I mentioned, business process outsourcing and other custom services. And then I'll just pass it off quickly to Dave. This is our last slide to talk quickly about tax pricing.
Yeah, and I think I have 30 seconds left, which is fine. That's enough to go through this slide. For tax side, we're on a tier level pricing, and provided the prices there based on what type of task it is. And it's based on the source documents and or accounts inputs. Accounts inputs go from an entity level standpoint. Source documents go for an individual base. Services we include are identified here. Most people, when they come to using outsourcing and remote staffing, they think it's just for the individuals only, and that's all we do, which we do a lot more than that. These are your main tax filings here, plus we do more foreign bank filings, etc. So what you might have out there, we can assist with. So turn that back to Amy, and I believe time is up.
Great. Thanks, Shelley and Dave. Great presentation. We would open it up for questions. I'm not seeing any in the questions pane. So as we are out of time, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to submit them to xcmclientservices@xcmsolutions.com, and I will reach out to Dave and Shelley for you. Again, thanks, Dave and Shelley, for helping out with this session today. And this has been recorded, so a copy of the recording and the PowerPoint will be available on our Help Center, and the recording will be sent out to everybody tomorrow within 24 hours. They send it, so you should see it around 1 o'clock tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, for participating in today's session.